Hey class, Dr. Diaz here to talk to you about Module 10. This is the very last video for Module Expectations. It's kind of weird because I've been used to doing videos for you, and I thought I'd choose a place today that is more in public, so more comfortable, more fun than my usual meeting spot that I do these. Module 10, not a lot to say except a giant paper to submit. I know we have a discussion 10. Don't need to really cover that, as you guys are familiar and versed with what to do for your discussion, your very last discussion. But we really want to focus and talk about Module 10's rubric for your final paper. That's the most important thing that we're going to talk about. So, I have the computer here with our course open. I've been going through everything, and I've pulled the rubric open for Module 10, your final paper, and I want to talk to you about this. So you can pause the video and go open it up. Under Learning folders, under Module 10, this is going to be your final project submission. And let's just go through this rubric piece by piece because you're done. Woohoo! You are finishing up your research paper. All your hard work is paid off. So, I'm going to ask first, and I'll put this in an announcement, that you please submit an entire research paper. You notice the rubric starts with methods, goes to results, and then discussion. Please attach the cleaned up, polished first couple of chapters that you've worked on from 510 that we cleaned up in 520's beginning week. This is your intro, your literature review. They need to be with this. I want you to turn in a complete paper. So you don't need to do extra work. All you're doing is just putting that in your paper and then adding your methods, results, and discussion. You have already written your intro and literature review. It's already been graded. I'm asking that you just please make this a complete paper and have your intro, literature review, methods, results, and discussion. So let's take a look at the first line here in the rubric. We've got methods, participants. Quick note, as we're looking this over, we've spent extensive time working and writing feedback and critiquing and resubmitting and revising these sections. So at this point, you should be just turning in the paper polished and cleaned and collaborated. So looking over your methods, please make sure after you've made the revisions I've given you for these areas that they match the following. There's a girl here who keeps talking and she's getting on my nerves. Okay, so methods, participants. Outline the participants in the study and how they were recruited. Methods, materials. Describe the materials created for the study and how they specifically address the research question in the audience. Again, these are the rubric content pieces that you've done when you wrote your methods section. We want to make sure your final product has this, and I'll be looking over for it. And again, we have done revisions to make sure your papers have these. So please look over and make sure your paper matches this rubric, okay? The methods, methodological procedures. Describes the methodological procedures used to collect the data and how the material was used in collecting. To do this well, you're going to have this piece just like what you've done when you wrote your methods section only. So you see here the first three sections are all about your methods, the participants, the materials, and the methodological procedures. So you're going to want to make sure that all these three sections are met according to the rubric. And again, you've done this prior, and I'm going to be looking to see if your edits were done and that your methods meets these criterions. Let's move to the results. The results portion of your final project rubric. Results raw data, results descriptive statistics, results statistical test, results conducted, results manuscript standards. Let's start with the first one. Results raw data. Describes how the raw data was reduced for statistical analyses, clearly detailing each step of the process. For the exemplary, you're going to be doing this with clear contextualized and aligning it to the research question. So your raw data, how was the data cleaned? Reduced means cleaning. How did you reduce the data? Did you have to delete or omit a line because there was a section of data that was not entered? That's cleaning, that's called reducing. Before you put it in SPSS to analyze it, can you tell me in a detailed way the steps you took to clean your data before putting it into SPSS for analysis? Let's look at the next piece, descriptive statistics. Did you create a table outlining the descriptive statistics for the key variables? Again, this is a table that shows the descriptive statistics for the key variables. And I know you did this in your results section that we worked on prior in this class, so again, we're making sure these areas are met for your final paper because the grade will be given. The statistical tests for the result. Describe your statistical test selected and explain why that test is the most appropriate for your data. I think you guys have done an outstanding job understanding stats. Again, in your results section you've already written, you've done this, and I want you to make sure this is all clean and polished up with the correct revisions made, and that your final paper has the correct stats test that you selected, and you're going to tell me why you selected this. Let's look at results conducted. In the results conducted, you describe how the statistical test was conducted. Don't say, I put it in SPSS and ran the analyses. That's not what we're looking for here. What we want to look for is describing how the test was conducted means tell me a little bit about the test from what you've learned about it. If you're doing a t-test, the way you can describe how the statistical t-test was conducted, you can say the t-test looks at two different groups and compares the variance on an independent variable and displays significance with a p-value. That's me describing how the test was conducted. Clearly detail each step of the test and how the software was used. At this point, you integrate SPSS to say, SPSS took into account two unique groups and measured them across one independent variable, and SPSS produces an output that allows us to look at this difference in means. That's the kind of voice that you can have when you're describing how the test was conducted in SPSS. Results, manuscript standards. Again, this is a huge, crucial part. Have your paper look like an empirical research article. All of those articles you downloaded and read for your annotated bibliography and your literature review, that's what you're aiming your paper to look like. In terms of the manuscript standards, a manuscript standard is having appropriate headers for every paragraph and section. I expect to see an intro header, a results, methodology, results, discussion. I'm sorry if I said results twice. Let me go through that again. An intro in the center. This is a header that is centered in bold. Introduction, literature review, methodology, results, discussion. And with under each of those headers, you have subheaders, which are to the left and italicized. And you would have, for instance, methodology, participants, methodology, analyses, and so forth. So this is part of manuscript standards. The rubric says, the manuscript is professional quality outlined by APA standards. Let's look at discussion now. You just finished writing your discussion, and I know all of you are revising it right now. I provided lengthy, in detail notes and feedback for you to write your revisions. So I understand you're in the process of doing that right now, but let's look over what you should have for your final paper, and it should be exactly the same as what I've told you to rewrite in your discussion chapter that you're working on. Nothing should change, meaning I'm not going to expect something new from discussion. Let's look at this. So in your discussion for your final paper, details, discussion, hypothesis. This is the first one. Details the results of the data analyses and how the results relate to the hypothesis. So tell me how your results relate to your hypothesis. Do they contradict? What did you find? How did it line up to what you first started out thinking? Next section, discussion, previous literature. Details how the results complement and or contradict the previous literature on the topic, justifying assertions with data. This is a big big challenging area. What you need to do for this is take all the articles that you had for your annotated bibliography and lit review, pull out and find and tell me how your results complement existing data and how they contradict existing data. I hope to see a minimum of 3 here of each, that you have ways that they've complemented each other. If your study found that smoking leads to less socializing, and one of your articles you looked at for your lit review had a study that said smoking leads to less socializing, your study complemented research. The other opposite of that is if your study shows smoking lowers socializing, but you found in your research review, your lit review, that smoking promotes socializing, then you have results that contradict existing literature. This is the vein of thought you're going to be in while you write this, and you're going to dig and look and find ways that your data has complemented current research as well as how it's contradicted it. You're going to use citations, sources. You're going to cite and source the studies you're comparing your results to, and this is you making assertions with backed up empirical research. Let's move to the strengths and limitations. Outlines the strengths and limitations of the research, supporting the assertions with analyzed data. So, in this section, just as you did in your discussion, give me 3 strengths and limitations, and 3 strengths and 3 limitations. So you're going to think of what was good about your study, what was good, what are some of the strengths of your study, what are some of the limitations you encountered. I know you've written this in your discussion. Let's make sure it's in your final paper. I've also provided a lot of feedback on this topic for your discussion chapter. Okay, discussion. Tests not appropriate. Identifies other statistical tests and tells me why the tests would not be appropriate for analyzing your data. This is a unique paragraph. Okay, you can have a subheader that says tests not appropriate, and under this, in this section, in the class we're trying to measure and test and look at proficiency of understanding other statistical analyses you've learned. So in my little example, if my paper I used a t-test, well, in this section as I write my final paper, I'm going to explain to you why other tests that I learned would not have worked for my study. So in this section, maybe I pick 3 tests and I say t-tests were appropriate, however ANOVAs weren't, MANOVAs weren't, and multiple linear regression. Those are the 3 that I think would not work, and I'm going to tell you why. And you can go ahead and explain to me why. Why wouldn't a multiple linear regression work for your study if that's not what you used? For me, if I had a t-test and I wanted to tell you why linear regression would not have worked, I would explain it to you and say I was not measuring a set of variables and their interactions. However, I was measuring a comparison between 2 groups on one variable. That's going to be the way you handle this section as well. So please tell me why these additional tests that you did not use, why they were not appropriate for your study. Discussion, study standards. Please, this is another section that was in your discussion paper that you're revising. I know some of you may have left it out, but you're putting it in. In this part, we want to make sure this is in your final paper, and you tell me the extent to which your study adheres to the APA standards. And I found the easiest way to do this is have a subsection called Study Standards under your discussion chapter. And I know the APA has standards, like standards 1 through 8. A very nice, cohesive, clear, organized way of displaying this section is to say Study Standard, APA Standard 1, blah, and then to show how your study met it. APA Standard 2, blah. And then you give an example of how your study met it. APA Standard 3, blah, this is what it is. This is how my study met it. So this is the standard, this is how I met it. This is the standard, this is how I met it. 1 through 8. That's a very clean, concise way of delivering understandable knowledge on how you have your study adhering to APA standards. Let's look at this last section, discussion, future research. So at this very last section, you're going to be discussing how future research is needed on your study. So think about your discussion that you've already written. I've given critiques and feedback for your final chapter. in this section. It says, identifies areas still in need of future research based on the data analyses. Please have a minimum of 3. I will be looking for 3 at a minimum. You need to think about 3 things that your study still needs to benefit from or could benefit from. So if I studied smoking and socializing, one benefit might be that I was limited to certain environments and I need to expand my research to multiple types of environments to see the effects. Another one could have been, I need to look at what type of smokers. Are they casual, consistent, habitual? Are there differing types of people who smoke? They only smoke when they drink, they only smoke when they go out, they don't smoke at home. Those are all future considerations for this fictitious example that I'm giving you. And the last piece is something I do for you, the articulation of response. Let's make sure that you have no major errors, that you have your citations correct, your grammar and sentence structures are well, you spelled everything correctly, you looked it over, you edited it, you had a friend read over it, and it's well organized. So please think about those things. My biggest advice is please have an organized paper. I think we've all been doing a great job for 2 classes now where you are doing an outstanding job polishing your organization with your papers. So this covers the rubric for your final paper, milestone 10. And as always, it's been a pleasure. I enjoy showing you what you can do for your final paper submission. Please, again, remember you are to submit your intro and lit review along in addition to your methods, results, and discussion, because this makes a complete 5-chapter paper. Even though the rubric does not have your intro or lit review, please attach it. Please make this one cohesive document. So you have chapters 1 through 5, intro, lit review, discussion. Intro, lit review, methodology, results, discussion. You're going to be glad because you're now going to have a great work example to show or use later in your academic or career future to show that you have proficiency in writing empirical research and carrying out research in social sciences. All right, take care, guys.